Tonight on Podcast Them Down, we're reviewing Memoriam's new album, Rise to Power. Podcast Them Down! Hail Metal Nation, it is I, Tim. Joining me is Doug, and we are continuing our highly successful review series in which we are applying our metal codex, previously talked about this year, and applying it to various albums. And today's album is the Memoriam album, and I have pulled up the ever-important spreadsheet so we can keep track of our ratings and not publish the overall scores, because that's how we've been doing it.
Yeah, it's more a tool. It's very important that our listeners understand that metal is about more than songs.
Yeah. So, I was distracted. Rise to Power came out in 2023, and I saw you have the CD format. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we can assess the presentation completely.
I unfortunately had to employ Spotify, which is like it was awful. I hate Spotify, but I couldn't find it on Bandcamp. There are other Memoriam releases on Bandcamp. Couldn't find it on YouTube. There's just singles. So I couldn't. Yeah, I don't know where to just purchase digital files anymore, and they haven't been sent to us for free. So this is an unbiased review. We have not been compensated for these albums, so we'll give it to you straight, unlike most of these other reviews as far as I can tell. So yeah. I did peek around at some other reviews because I was confident in how I felt about it, but it did seem off. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't just me.
It is interesting. We can get into this more of the substance, but I find this kind of music, you get very diverse responses to everything. Some of it's kind of shilly, some of it's kind of zombie-ish, and some of it's like 100% legit. But, all right, let's get into it. First, we got to agree on genre.
Okay, so I think the majority of this is like mid-paced, older death metal. That's what I got from it. But like it's like when I think death metal now, it's all like blazing fast. Even like death was fast as shit around the same time. The influences of Memoriam, I don't know, or the precursors to Memoriam, I guess, were popular. So it's like, yeah, so it's death metal, but it's not really, it's like groove based death metal. But that also kind of makes me think of Pantera.
Yeah, well, I think you picked up on like exactly. We'll get into Bolt Thrower in a second, but can we agree on old school death metal or just death metal unmodified? I'd say one or the other. I
think it would have to be old school death metal because that opens the door to the mid-tempo-ness. Old school death metal. All right, and review day, that would be today, which I won't tell you what today is. Okay. Yeah, dub it in later. It's Monday or Thursday. That's what day it is.
So to talk about Memoriam, and this is their fifth album in 7 years, which is something.
I know, like the Beatles put out 2 albums a year, and like that era, they could just crank them out, right? But I see it as a red flag if you're able to produce so many albums in such a short amount of time.
I think we'll touch on this in a second, but I think we're seeing some creative unblockage as part of this. So Memoriam was founded in 2017 as a out of the ashes of Bolt Thrower, but I think it features Carl Willits, famously of Bolt Thrower, and I believe the guitarist and maybe the bassist come from Benediction, another old school British death metal band. Just really quickly on Bolt Thrower, since it's most relevant here, them and Benediction are kind of like probably high B tier death metal groups. They both be a top draw at like the Merwin Death Fest, but
right,
crossover in the way Morbid Angel is.
Yeah, they'd be playing during the day if they were at Maryland Death Fest.
Bolt Thrower co-headlines, or they headlined a night, probably not the best night. Yeah, twice.
Really? Okay.
I think Benediction's a little smaller over here, but so Bolt Thrower was founded in '87. They started off as Death Grind. They were out of a kind of a punk ethos. The name Bolt Thrower and their early lyrical themes all come from the game Warhammer 40,000.
I knew that once.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten that fact until right now.
And I'm happy to see a couple bands have picked that up, and there's now a band called Chainsword and a few others. So their early records were Death Grind, sounded like shit, and they sung about Warhammer. Like I said, the punk ethos is there. Joe Bench, the bassist, is probably one of the first women involved in extreme metal. And the significance to the sound is dope more or less than I've stated. The band never made a big deal of it. And even here on this new Memoriam album, there's no writing credits, nothing. It's just the band. And I don't even think they say that much here. And Bolt Thrower was the same way. So they were Death Grind, then they that kind of peaking with Realms of Chaos. Then probably closer, the most technical they got would be like the Fourth Crusade and War Master, a little more in the thrash style of death, but still with the blast beats. And then they settled into this kind of groove death style, which is different than like, it's hard to even, because you say groove death, you think of shit like the Chris Barnes records and all that.
Oh, God.
And it's more like you're being run over by a tank. Like
two quick comments. First of all, Metal Archives lists Bolt Thrower and Benediction as just death metal with no qualifiers. Regarding your tank comment, I have in my notes, I know our motto has been no prep, but my mind is a sieve these days. But I wrote, you sent me a short list of Bolt Thrower songs to listen to, which I used to cleanse the palate, so to speak, after this, after the Memoriam album. Anti-Tank, that song in particular, I was more able to visualize a tank than I have ever been for the meme-ified Sabaton. Like, we brought up Cardboard Tank. None of their songs sound like a tank. Anti-Tank sounds like a tank.
Yeah. And we'll talk about this in our war metal episode coming up, but Bolt Thrower's the real thing. Like, there's no position taken. They're just describing acts of war and the consequences of war. And at its like best, Memoriam is sort of an extension of that, probably taking those consequences a few steps past the battle. But yeah, so just to wrap up with Bolt Thrower, they switched to this death groove sound. It's very interesting because they're people that are totally committed to like the Fourth Crusade sound, the more thrashy, or who go for the grind thing. But if you look at what the kids like, apparently, on the basis of Spotify, it's the groove sound. And their last album, 2005, I guess I have that right here.
I mean, those once loyal.
Yeah. That was kind of the epitome of that style. And it seems to produce all their most popular songs. I'd argue the production quality has a lot to do with that. They seem undemanding with producers or unable to afford always getting a great job. But Creative Blockage, so that album came out in 2005. They disbanded in 2016 with the death of the drummer. So no albums for 11 years. And their stated position was they couldn't record a better album than Those Once Loyal.
Okay.
So then we get into Memoriam. So this is the 5th album. It's the 2nd album of their 2nd trilogy of records. And the Memoriam records stick with the Bolt Thrower and Benediction template, but have actually kind of been all over the place. Some have been more just sort of monolithically aggressive, like Bolt Thrower, and some have been more diverse, like this. And they've done, some samples and some things that wouldn't fit in the Bolt Thrower template. But we are only talking about Rise to Power today, and that is my convoluted way of getting us here.
Dead air. Where's my dead air button? There it is.
Dead air.
Their reviews on Metal Archives, the scores seem to be on par, in the neighborhood of the Bolt Thrower reviews, so. And you have been talking about Bolt Thrower for 20 years, and today was the first time I actually sat down and attempted to concentrate on a Bolt Thrower. It's not that I didn't like them. It's just that I never listened to them, never put the work in. I get it now, but
yeah.
Suffice it to say, I did it after listening to Memoriam. So
I think that's fair, and that says something about Memoria. But with that said, I'll let you kick off Act 1.
Yeah, so in accordance with our codex, we have divided the album into an Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. It's not just a bunch of songs. The whole album is an experience. And pull up my notes here. Never Forget starts the same way It's a Wonderful Life starts. And I don't know, seconds into this album, I was already I can't take this seriously. So you know how It's a Wonderful Life starts with everyone praying to the angels about George Bailey or whatever. And this one starts with I am the enemy. I am the enemy. I am the enemy. I am the enemy. But this song is not I Am the Enemy. That's a different song later. So, if you have more detailed thoughts, a theme throughout this album is it just kind of meanders.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is for this kind of band. There's no one answer, as much as we'd like to impress one on reality. But typically you put this at the end of an album. This is the kind of thing that would sound okay at the end, where you're stretching your form a bit. The mid-pace thing, the samples, a little bit of variety to the structure. But this is the very first song.
Right. And every song, with 2 exceptions, are over 5 minutes. Which is apparently longer for them than previous albums as well. So the first song clocks in at 6 minutes and 20 seconds, including the intro. And I don't know. I was less than impressed with the beginning of this album, but that also means hopefully there's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, again, really heavy lyrical themes about the Holocaust, of course, but it's an interesting way to open a record. We'll just leave it there.
Yeah, maybe they weren't saying "I am the enemy." I forget.
I think they were. Yeah, it's just, I am. Yeah, it's in there.
Okay, So then it moves along to Total War. And this song sounded to me like an RVG song.
Yeah, I can see that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of like old-timey, thrashy-ish riffs. A lot of RVG songs, when I write them like, because that's where my hand is. So there's a lot of tritones or a lot of major thirds, or you know, because that's the natural chord that your hand makes. And I got a lot of RVG out of this song.
Yeah, and this is more like your opening song, typically. Use this as a good opportunity to talk about Carl Willits, the vocalist here, who's kind of the master of the death metal because it's death metal sound. Like, he's not stretching himself every second technically. It's kind of just a growled spoken word delivery, but for what it is, and this very distinct and pronounced style, typical of grind and earlier stuff. I think he's one of the strongest vocalists in it, but you're never going to see him in the same list with like George Corpse Grinder Fisher in terms of wowing you technically.
Yeah, it's just kind of one note. I don't know if it's just this album or what, but there wasn't too much variation in the screams, which combine that with the lack of variation of the tempos, and it's just like you get like it's one dimensional, and that continues kind of through Total War, but Total War gets better than Never Forget.
Yeah, I think you're right about the sound. There's usually there's nothing on here that would lead me to think he's losing capacity. Some of the Memoriam albums have a more varied performance, but there's a good scream at the end of this song, and that's really all I remember. It's a very stable or monotone delivery.
Man, I wish they would put the lyrics. Someone put the lyrics up on Metal Archives, please.
But they are like our war, total war, total war.
Is that a Slayer song?
Probably. They may use less words than Manowar, possibly.
That's impressive.
And they use I guess this isn't uncommon, but they use the same phrases again and again. Like all sorts of themes on day is lost, night is won. Honor, Valor, Pride was the chorus to several songs. I think before it was before the name of the last Bolt Thrower record. And this song is nominally about today. And now history repeats itself once more in 2022, a new global war. As the blood runs red, increasing numbers of the dead, intense hatred is now bred, the war machine is fed.
You don't need to rhyme in death metal. I appreciate the effort, though. All right, then. Next is I Am the Enemy. My only comment on this one is, I get it. This is another song that kind of overstates its welcome. It's too long for what's there, and they repeat "I am the enemy" too many times.
Yeah, this is a bit of a grower because I saw the positive reviews of this record, and the fact that I have loved maybe 3 of the 4 first albums, and it's like everything is kind of lies flat, but it does grow a bit. And what I will say about this record, maybe compared to some of their earlier records, and certainly compared to some of Bolt Thrower's material, including the most popular material, is these songs all have kind of a dynamic structure, right? Like we're talking about a beginning, middle, end with the album. These songs have a clear time changes and kind of a pace internal to the song that isn't necessarily a given for this style of music. I do agree with you. It overstays its welcome half of the time.
Yeah, It's I call it death magnetic syndrome because Metallica could have scooped out 20 minutes of that album and had a better album just through subtraction.
Yeah, and this is 8 songs. You know, you could take a couple minutes out of this. You got 5 or 6 good songs, and you don't have a record.
Right.
All right.
So I would say this is the end of the first act.
Yeah, I concur. Yeah. And it's a 5 from me.
5. Yeah, I thought Total War was the best of it. I mean, there's plenty of good ideas. It's just they didn't kind of pan out all the way. But yeah, I'm gonna go with a 4 on that. See, we don't like everything.
Yeah.
I'm just pre-addressing the critics. Or post-addressing? I'm addressing the critics. All right. Next, The Conflict Is Within. So I thought this song had a lot of cool riffs that were then spoiled by boring riffs that immediately followed it. There's some really good ideas, and then just kind of like what followed those good ideas didn't really build on them. It was just like, here's something less exciting. And
it is like Bolt Thrower was sort of the master of taking very little and making that work. Like, I think, is Anti-Tank one of the, so they have, you know, like the Steve Harris gallop and like the John Schaefer gallop, they have the Cenotaph riff. And that's when they do the fade in and fade out with, you know, the you know, dun, 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 yeah, then that a few changes, but essentially the same song every record. And they make that work, you know, with maybe kind of the middle bridge or whatever being the X factor each song. So having a lot of ideas is not always a good thing, at least when Bolt Thrower is concerned.
There's a My Dying Bride song, since we're talking about British bands, called The Cry of Mankind. Yes. I love that song particularly because it's there's a main lead, right? That's in C sharp minor, I believe. And it is present throughout the entire song. And this is one measure over and over and over again. But it doesn't get boring. They manage to make it remain interesting the whole time, even though one of the guitars is just doing this one thing the whole time. And I've always been very impressed by that.
That's a long song too, isn't it? Like,
yeah, the album version's 12 minutes something.
Yeah.
It's up there. And I think the actual song ends though, and it just kind of turns into like this noise atmospheric thing, which I don't know if that guitar part remains there. All right, moving on with the next track of Act 2, which would be Annihilation's Dawn. Shouldn't that have an apostrophe because it didn't on Spotify? It does on Rise to Power. Rise to Power, Encyclopedia Metallicum.
It does on the record.
So Spotify fucked it up.
Yeah.
That deserves a boo.
Apostrophes in Sweden.
Do they?
I don't know.
I said this might be the best song.
I concur. This is the closest to the Bolt Thrower, still mid-tempo, but pretty aggressive, in-your-face sound. The being hit with a tank style.
Apostrophes are usually not used to show possession in Swedish. There you go. Yeah, the only knock I have on the song is towards the end of it, there's quite a few drum fills, right? And that's not the problem. I think the way it was, the way the production is, the drummer plays a lot of fills on the snare, and it's just like it was too much. Is because the snare is cutting through the whole mix so much, and they didn't back it off during during the drum fills. So when he does a bunch of drum fills that in a row that feature the snare, it's just like, all right, do anything else. But that's probably not him. That's probably the production.
Well, I think it's interesting. Okay, so they do credit a studio. There's like produced, mixed, and mastered by Russ Russell at Parlour Studios, Kettering, England. Recorded by Memoriam and Russ Russell at Parlour Studios. So, okay, that's actually probably kind of old school now, like recording all your instruments in a studio instead of miking them yourself and then emailing some files to someone somewhere.
Oh, you better believe that's what we're doing. You know why? Because mistakes don't cost money when you're tracking yourself. Mistakes cost money when you're paying by the hour.
Yeah, we'll talk about this in our production episode, but it really seems like even with consumer grade stuff, if you, with some minimal confidence, put a mic in front of something and send it to someone, you can get a decent sound out of about anything. And then things that sound like shit now are because someone has gone astray in their thinking more than the actual quality of the recording.
They're not in the box. They're not in the, the metal production is an expected target now. Here are some other bands that have recorded at Parlour Studios: The Haunted, At the Gates, Napalm Death, Dimmu Borgir. Very curious what year, because was it one of the bad albums? Evil. I haven't heard of a lot of these. Stormbringer. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah. Bangover. Stevie Jones. Doesn't sound metal. Necrosis with 2 Ks. That sounds metal. Viking Skull. And the reason I wanted to read this, Savage Messiah recorded there. And I love Savage Messiah. Savage Messiah, I believe we listened to some of them, are what Megadeth thinks they are.
Yeah. Good group.
But they're not. Savage Messiah is. All right. So, Annihilation's Dawn. Where'd my notes go? They're under this Parlour recording studio thing. Yeah. I think that rounds out the second act, although I could see ending the second act at All Is Lost. So if I were writing this album, All Is Lost, even with that title, would be the ballad, and that would either open your third act or close your second act.
Yeah,
however,
to me, it's in the second act.
All Is Lost is?
Yeah.
Well, all right, I'm fine with that. All I wrote for this one is meh.
Yeah,
this one kind of lost me. And I don't have any like specific reasons. I was just, like, by this point in the album, I'm just having a hard time focusing because maybe the snare fills took me out of it at the end of Annihilation's Dawn.
Yeah.
All Is Lost starts. I'm just like, all right.
It's really like they tried to do too much in each of these songs, and they're just not the band. Like they're living a life they're never going to live.
This would have been a good place for a change of pace instead of more of the same. And what we got is more of the same.
Yeah. So let's move.
So that's the end of Act 2 then.
Yeah. I think the conflict is within and Annihilation's Dawn are both decent. Annihilation's Dawn probably crosses the pretty good line. It's all competent. It's a 6.
It's similar to the first act. There's two meh songs and one pretty damn good song. So I'm gonna have to rate it higher than the first act. So yeah, I'll go with a 5, and you went with a 6. All right, closing the album, there are 2 tracks. Rise to Power, the title track, followed by The Pain. So Rise to Power has there's a lot of cool riffs, and I really liked the chord progressions because it was different than the rest of the album. They added more tension, and my notes say no, this is the best song. So
yeah, it's one of the Inner and I, they're both up there. This is a good song. Not coincidentally, it's the shortest song on the record, but it has a focus and intensity that
maybe that's why. It's
yeah.
shorter. It's shorter by. Oh, Annihilation's Dawn is the other short song.
Yeah,
that's perfect. Yeah, and they are both shorter than the next shortest song by 40 seconds.
So if we look at Those Once Loyal, the last Bolt Thrower record, the longest song on it is the slower in the record song, When Cannons Fade, at 5 minutes, 27 seconds. And most of them hit a cool 4 minutes.
Yeah, well, we found the sweet spot for Memoriam. So if you're listening to Memoriam, look at how long the song is, and if it's under 5 minutes, it's probably going to be good. But yeah, I really liked Rise to Power. I believe this had the chorus where it's just like, oh, fuck yeah, you know. Good concept. You're looking it up. For our listeners, he is shuffling through the liner notes.
For anyone younger than 30, this is where we used to have to get our lyrics.
Mm-hmm. That's worse. Many of us still do. Well, but it's tragic now because, as we get older and our eyesight starts to fade, we got to deal with this tiny, tiny print. We should get large print inserts made for aging metalheads.
Everyone would be happy if they just released CDs on a disc the size of a record.
I'd buy it.
Yeah. Then you could do the artwork that everyone responds to. I think we both go like 60% of the way on the whole vinyl thing. Quality of the recording and the fidelity and all that. Unless you buy the warmth of the analog thing is making a difference. It never touches CD quality. Sorry, and you destroy your record every time you play it. It looks nice on a shelf, though.
It does. It does look better on a shelf. And there were companies that tried to put little windows in their CD players, so on your hi-fi, you could see your CD spinning around, but it just never had the same same effect because it was in a little trapped in a little chamber.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember when CDs used to come in a separate box and be like,
the long
tall.
box.
Yeah.
What wasn't that? I thought that was an anti-shoplifting thing. But maybe it was just here's a lot more artwork.
I think it was a bit of both because I remember all the cases were that way even into the 2000s. But I think when the late 80s, early 90s, you'd literally buy a CD in a large box.
That's great. Yeah, my record collection is very small, and anytime I add to it, there's a lot of thought behind it. I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, I had to buy the blue splatter edition pre-order of this album, of a new album that I'm not going to listen to. That's all the rage is to put out the limited vinyl after you get successful enough where it doesn't matter how good your songs are anymore.
And I liked all that when the punk bands were doing it because they toured behind that and and sustain their tour by selling a tour record and price it right. But yeah, now it's just a gimmick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100% agree on Rise to Power. A banger of a song in the old bolt thrower style. And then we go to This Pain. So again, a dynamically structured.
Yes, this is finally like the big change of pace I've been waiting for the whole album. It has an acoustic intro.
And it's a good song. They're like, this is what 6 Million Dead or whatever. Never Forget, Never Again. I mean, this is that where that belongs on a record and is a better song.
Yeah, totally agree. And the when the band comes in after this acoustic intro, it is just heavy as fuck. And part of that is because you've just spent 40 minutes with this level of intensity that doesn't waver too much. And they finally took it away. And the way to make something sound huge is to take it away and then bring it back. And that's exactly what they did. And yeah, it makes this song really hit in a way that the other songs on the album don't. In terms of heaviness.
Yeah, concur.
But then the end of the song could have used a different outro, in my opinion, because it just kind of stops. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, am I done?
And they've always been the masters of like the slow fade. Being bolt thrower.
Right, fairness. Like a tank leaving the battlefield.
Yeah, like zooming out your perspective.
Yeah. Or like a helicopter shot.
The ritualized cycle of the First World War going over the top. The artillery start the day, and it was always like that, ending a record. It's like until the next day. But I agree, but minor point. Yeah,
but overall, I think this was the best part of the album. These two songs back to back. I still think Rise to Power was the best song, followed by Annihilation's Dawn, and then The Pain. So I'm going to have to score the third act much higher than the other two. I'm going to give it a 7.
Yeah, 7 here as well.
All right. Presentation. So I already complained. This is another area we have to score. The presentation is I already complained about Spotify not even getting the titles right. I can't find the lyrics online, but I don't have the CD, so I'm going to leave that to you to bring up.
Well, as I believe it's the same artist who's done, I would hope it's the same artist who's done all 5 of the Memoriam covers because they all look the same. It's like Carl Willits bought a series of art from a guy and just keeps using it.
It kind of this reminds me of most 90s album covers.
It's it thematically fits.
What would you say is going on here? Is this whole thing a statue?
It's like a pharaoh or a demon king, and it's surrounded by sort of ghostly soldiers, and it's sort of combining Gothic, First and Second World War imagery and Egyptian imagery all at once.
Yeah. The ghostly soldiers, they're all wearing gas masks and they have rifles. There are tanks in the background that have like demon heads on their turrets at the end of the barrels. And they're kind of in this like post-apocalyptic city that appears to be crawling with demons. I think I can put this up behind me while you talk about it.
Yeah, well, this is very like chaos, Warhammer 40K chaosy, but it's like they took what they would have done, what Carl Willits would have done anyway 30 years ago, and made it much more symbolic and figurative. It's good quality art. I think some of the covers on the earlier Memoriam albums are better, but I have no complaints with this. Again, it fits the aesthetic, it fits the sound, and it has good continuity with the style of music.
Yeah, I'm just looking for more detail in here. There's like all those 90s painted covers. There's just like a staggering amount of detail that has been crushed into an image this big on Spotify and this big on the CD. So
this is why you buy vinyl.
I
hope you get a CD in the package.
This this would be good to have as a poster, you know.
Yeah, and you like all the statuesque, like the gas. There's some Black Sabbath "Never Say Die" in here, but not even the album cover, but some of the fantasy art that came out of that. I really like this art. Looking at it in more detail, and it actually rewards that, which these Photoshop jobs you get these days doesn't always. And I got to give the band pictures are great. They all are very content at looking old as shit. And I love how Carl Willits, your singer, in all the pictures I've seen, is smoking.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It was some poor guy's job to edit out all the wheezing.
Yeah.
Oh God, I just hurt myself. Fabio Leone, who I believe we talked about in the last episode, also chain smokes. So.
It probably helps in a very narrow sense, and then hurts in many others.
Right. Yeah. So I love the artwork. I'm gonna base my score mostly on that. Artwork's a 9.
Yeah, I concur.
All right. Then our final category to rate is the trueness / metalness.
I mean, yeah, the album aside. What they've been doing, Carl Willits and the rest of the band members have been doing the same thing with just slightly, there's a box. They deliver pretty good in that box now and again and forever, as far as we know. It doesn't get more metal than that.
Yeah, there were a few swings and misses, but what they're trying to do is just the same thing. And I'd say this is way more metal than Camelot. I don't think it's as metal as Ripper's EP though, which is kind of how I had to bound this. So what's your score on this going to be?
8.
8. Yeah, I have to go with 7. Or do I? 7.5. We've had all integers, and I'm going up 1. Up half a 1. You know what I'm trying to say. No, you're right. It is an 8. It's not a 7. That's awfully close to Camelot, and it doesn't split the difference between them. So yeah, it's got to be closer to Tim Owens. It's an 8. You're right.
And one of the most rewarding things about our review format is now's the point where we don't share a score with you, even though we provided scores throughout.
Yeah, you should have been taking notes.
But I think it's a qualified recommendation from me and probably a step weaker from Tim.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah, is there anything you want to close with?
No, keep it up, Memoriam. And if you haven't heard Memoriam, this is an okay place to start. I think the last couple records are a little bit better.
Yeah,
check out Bolt Thrower too.
If you sleep on this one, they'll have another one in like 8 months. So
yeah. Well, this is only part 2 of the new trilogy. So
the end of the trilogy. Is there a story?
I've been meaning to look that up. It may just be in Carl Willett's lines.
It's not. If there is a story, it's not obvious. So I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe we'll review the end of the story and figure out what the hell the story is. All right. Well, until next time, Metal Nation, keep your tank metal true. Stop listening to Sabaton and listen to more Memoriam, I guess. Or better yet, Bolt Thrower.
Oh, did we hit 20 minutes like we promised?
We hit it. We hit it a while ago.
Yeah.